Hello, everybody, and welcome again to Kathy, Andy, and I looking at post-election astrology and all the players globally that seem to be connected with everything that we're talking about. And so we've got a few things to talk about. And Kathy has kind of a timeline of things that we did predict that have happened. But I did want to just mention one thing first. A few people have asked us to look at the chart of Avril Haines. Well, we haven't got time to do it today. She's the current director of the Department of National Intelligence, and her report was due this week. She was due to hand it to Biden, apparently. We did briefly look at her chart, and it looks like she has found evidence of election interference, but we want to look at that closer before we talk about that on here. So just know that we are listening to all that we can, but we can't look at everything. So anyway, Kathy, your little list of things we talked about that have come to pass.
Well, we said that the December 15 Gemini full moon was going to unleash uncomfortable and unwelcome disclosures about Elon Musk and about his role in relationships. And it's come out that the Air Force is questioning him as a national security risk, and also the way Starlink is run. And that's pretty unwelcome, and that noise has gotten very loud this week. And also there's a little kerfuffle going on between him and the SEC coming to a head. He's been under investigation for securities fraud. I think irregularities in how he took over Twitter or purchased it or something. I'm not quite sure of the specifics, but right before the full moon, he had a demand to either agree to a settlement figure or they were going to indict him. So we haven't heard what has happened with that. But so that's one thing. And just pause button for those of you who say, oh, why aren't you looking at Elon now? I would refer you to our video, Election 2024 Astrology, Global Events, Assad, Gabbard, Broligarchs. And it's an hour and 31-minute video. It's on Louise's Cosmic Owl Astrology channel. It's on my channel. And mine has timestamps, and Louise will have timestamps on hers soon after we put this up. So you can look at our analysis of Musk's chart and what's going on now. And a lot of things are kind of lighting up with that. The second big area, and this is going to lead into what we will discuss today, we have been talking about different astrological aspects showing NATO increasingly coming to the fore, and this being a factor in what's going on in the US. And at that December 15 Gemini full moon, there was the handoff between Mercury stationing direct, trining Mars retrograde, trining Mercury in NATO's chart, and it's a grand fire trine. And I had said this is going to bring, I've been saying airstrikes, but it could be some kind of action, something forceful. And what has happened? NATO has taken over the lead in handling Ukraine from the US. So basically Trump-proofing that situation. NATO's head, Mark Rutte, met with President Zelensky. NATO is giving Ukraine 19 air defense systems, and we had a tower moment, which was the title of our last video, and a Ukraine agent actually blew up, set a bomb. I've been saying cluster bombs, set a bomb that killed a Russian general. So things are happening. Andy, you have still, oh, Syria's oil refinery shut down today. Andy's been talking a lot about the role of Syria and everything that's going on. So I hand it over to you, Andy.
Well, just real quickly, in the very beginning, we all said, but I specifically said that the EU and NATO was going to be a much bigger deal than what people may have initially expected. And that whatever was happening in the EU, based on their fears of what might be going on with Trump, would have a significant impact, that there would be information that would circle back. I mean, we said this 6 weeks ago, and now we're starting to see those things come to fruition. I also, when we talked about this, the three of us, the period when Mars went retrograde on December the 6th as being a time that we would expect a lot of changes happening very, very quickly. The expulsion of the Assad family in Syria happened right after that. And that is gigantic. It's gigantic. It's gigantic. Another real quick point that we've made allusions to is the position of Russia. Russia's not nearly as strong, in my opinion, as they may wish to appear. And the problems in Syria, and then probably soon problems with North Korea as well, are likely to have a gigantic impact. I persist in my theory that things are not as smooth sailing for Trump as people might wish to think. But the confluence of NATO taking a lead, something we talked about that I don't think anybody was really talking about 6 weeks ago, is now starting to happen. And my expectation is that heats things up quite a bit. So we'll see.
Yeah. And as well, you know, back to Avril Haines, we've got to see if that report's actually released. So we don't know that yet. So to us, it's not to everything. So I think we're going to start with Ukraine and NATO charts together because because of what we've talked about, you know. So let's have a look. And a lot of this has to do with the new director of NATO, you know, Mark Rutte. But you know, again, we can't look at all charts every time. So, so where should we start on this one, guys?
What jumps out to me immediately? Saturn, NATO's Saturn, right on top of Ukraine's. It's exactly on, it's right between Ukraine's Venus and Sun, but this also pulls in its Mercury and Jupiter. Saturn is a stabilizing influence. Saturn, this is glue. This is glue. This says to me that NATO is supposed, that Ukraine is really supposed to be part of NATO, and that it's a long-term situation, whether Ukraine is a member or not. The Saturn being there is really, really strong. Also notice that if you look in the first house, NATO's Jupiter at 28 degrees Capricorn is an out of sign conjunction with Ukraine's Saturn. So there's another Saturn contact, and that's a big one. And Pluto in the sky is right there as well. Pluto in the sky is right there on top of Ukraine's Saturn. So that is a changing in its either its limitations, its sovereignties, whatever it belongs to. So that would presage something big going on there as well. Those are the two things that get me. I'm sure there is a lot more, but those are the first two I will start with.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention one thing that I hadn't actually kind of noticed before. That the North Node for the Ukraine chart is at 18 Capricorn, and I work with the Venus star point cycle, and the morning star Venus is often related to wars breaking out, and the Ukraine war broke out after we had a Venus star point at 18 Capricorn. But now we have one coming up at 2 Aries, which is very close to Mercury of the NATO chart. And I've kind of been, and that's kind of contracts and, you know, coming together. And I've kind of thought there might be new alliances for several reasons. And I'm kind of wondering, so that's March 22nd, the actual new star point. I'm kind of wondering if there's going to be some new agreement coming up with this new NATO guy kind of taking the reins and being seemingly very firm. We've had a few comments from people who are Dutch and, you know him from when he was prime minister there, and they say, you know, he wants justice for that plane being shot down that was under his prime ministership. So, you know, he's kind of not a fan of Russia, shall we say? Anyway.
Well, that star point timing that you mentioned is very close to the final eclipse in the Aries Libra cycle, which will be at 10 degrees Aries at the end of March, and it'll be on NATO's Mars and Venus conjunction in Ukraine's second house of resources.
And we've got a Mercury retrograde happening at the same area of the chart that the Venus retrograde is happening at. So relationships and contracts and communication and, well, yeah, there's, I wouldn't be that surprised if he pushes it through for them to be members.
Andy, what you got?
Yeah, I mean, I think Ukraine is becoming more powerful, and I think Russia is becoming less powerful, and I think that that leads to a higher likelihood of their alliance with NATO. In some sense, there might have been some fear for those countries just on the western frontier of Russia, but I think that Russia is having serious issues. They're having issues with executing the war in Ukraine. They're having issues in the Middle East and Central Africa. They're having financial issues. They're having military armaments production issues. And Ukraine has now become sort of a power in that the drones that they've created are actually doing a lot of good. So if I was trying to predict the future, my opinion is that Ukraine becomes more powerful, aligns themselves with NATO, and that has a distinctive will lead to a real problem for Russia. I think Russia goes downhill and NATO goes uphill. So we'll see.
Yeah, I agree. Any other thoughts, or did you want to look at any other charts with this? Or
Well, I will just point out, look at that 13 degrees cardinal, 14 degrees cardinal activity. NATO's Neptune at 13 Libra, which by the way is on the US Saturn at 14 Libra, is opposite NATO's Sun at 14 Libra, and the two of them are squaring Ukraine's Neptune in Capricorn in the 12th house, which, you know, that's been a point of sacrifice, essentially. And this is also going to get kicked in with Jupiter Saturn square, that it's going to be exact on Christmas Eve, because Saturn will be at 13 Pisces in Ukraine's second house. Well, actually, it's there now. It's just sitting there in its second house. So it's ongoing. It's second house of resources, money, values, and that is in a sextile or an opportunity aspect to that Neptune at 14 Capricorn. And so the square is going to involve Jupiter in the fifth house at 13 Gemini, which will be in an adjustment aspect to that Neptune. There'll be ongoing negotiations, and something might start locking into place by December 24th with this square.
Yeah, would not be surprised at all with that hit. Yeah.
And on and just to elaborate, we talked about the solstice chart in the last video, the December 21st chart, and at that time the moon is going to be at 13 Virgo, which will be in please tell me where, in Ukraine's eighth house of other people's money, investments, and that's going to be trining Neptune in the 12th. So this is a lot of technical stuff to say that this next season is really important to Ukraine in terms of other people's money, in terms of investment in it, in terms of a stabilizing of it having been this victim that's been the victim, the land victim. But also I think all of this shores up the spirit of the people, because if you think of what that country has been through and what those people have actually risen up and done and transcended, this should be a big moment of shifting things into another gear.
Yeah, I have a friend in Kiev, and I talk to her often, and you know, they have we have no idea what they're going through on a daily basis, but they have kind of just stepped up, and they are not going to take it lying down. That's for sure. You know? And they really want their relationship as a country to be with the West. They do not want to be part of Russia. So the people, anyway.
Andy, what do you see this?
Yeah, I mean, one of the core issues I think that's happening over the past few years is really the distortion of truth. What's true? How do we find truth? And when Russia, I'm going to go back here real fast. When Russia was about to invade Ukraine, and the expectation was they would run in 2 weeks, they'd be done. I said, it's not going to be like that. Russia's going to have serious issues. It's going to drag on. Ukraine's going to surprise people. So the reason I'm bringing this up is that one of the real systemic issues that's happening in the United States is a distortion of truth. There's a lot of reasons for that. But when we look at Ukraine and NATO, the ideology that Russia is a superpower and they're a nuclear and they're a badass, I don't think is really the truth. And I think that conditions are working against Russia right now, which is an opportunity for NATO and other people to kind of push the envelope a little bit. And I do think that NATO is likely to come in and take a much more active role in supporting Ukraine. Poland's likely to take a very active role in this. So I just think that the narrative that Russia's the big bad wolf is maybe going to be shifted a bit. So my expectation, again, goes back to something we talked about, 6-8 weeks ago. Things are different. And because of that, and I would invite people to go back and look at all the videos we've had as we kind of outline this progression. It's going to get wild. I really do think that. And I think, and again, one of the things we talked about early on, information, the idea of what's true and what's not, what's to be revealed and what's not. I think that information is likely to come out here, especially because NATO is now kind of having to stand up for itself. That will have a negative impact on Trump, Musk, and all the rest of them. So that was my initial assessment, my initial theory. I still stand by that, and I think that that's likely to happen. So short answer is, I think NATO and Ukraine are going to align. I think that Ukraine will be part of NATO, and I think that Russia will suffer as a result. And I think that's a good thing. So that's what I think.
And I just had a thought as you were talking, Andy. We know that there were all those claims of all these connections between the Biden family, particularly, and Ukraine and things like that. I wouldn't be surprised if something came out about how they've been making that one up too. Yeah,
well,
go on, Kathy.
Somebody did.
Well, I mean,
someone
that's
did
already
tweet.
happening.
No, that happened this week. So we
Oh,
have the Gemini full moon squaring Neptune, and the person who was the informant on the Biden crime syndicate has pled guilty. He's flipped. He said, "Oh, I lied. I lied." And you hearing this on the news? No, but it's been reported, and that happened now as the information full moon squared Neptune.
And once again, it goes back to the idea that information would specifically arise from the EU, most specifically Eastern Europe, that would be revelatory in what was really going on with Trump and the United States, and that they're connected. And I still maintain that there is a very distinctive connection between information that's likely to come out through the election fraud in Romania, through all sorts of different lines of communication. That's going to be a big deal, and I would expect that gets more and more pervasive in the coming weeks. I mean, astrology is kicking, but I mean, I just think that, again, truth ultimately will be revealed. And I believe that Pluto and Aquarius is when that's happening, and go Pluto. So, yeah, that's what
I also, if it's all right with you, I just wanted to put the transits with the Ukraine chart, because one other big turning point is coming up for their chart.
Yes, please.
Is that Uranus will station direct again on January the 30th, right on the bottom of their chart, their basis of security, their homeland at 23 Taurus. But
You're
of course,
right.
that's square to the Ukraine moon in Aquarius, which is the people. And I think, and Uranus is the modern guide for the sign of Uranus. That speaks radical change to me as well. So, you know, in many, many ways, there's a few things. It's also going to square their Jupiter. And yeah, it's been
Well,
there.
It's amazing that you put that chart up, because look at where the transiting moon will be at 26 Aquarius.
Just a few hours before NATO Uranus turns, it will be on the
And
moon.
the US moon, the US people, is 27 Aquarius. And Kamala Harris's Saturn is there.
And look where Venus will be at that point too.
So
opposing Mars in the Ukraine chart too. So that signifies a shift too. There's several shifts going on here too. So it's like, and that doesn't mean to say that, you know, it will happen on the day, but that could be, you know, perhaps the day they announce that, you know, they've agreed the deal for Ukraine to join or something like that, the start of a big change and turn. Transiting Mars by retrograde is about to cross the south node of the Ukraine chart and will station direct on that south node pretty much, because the south node is 18 degrees in the house of politics and significant relationships and other things.
and Mars is gonna sit basically in conjunction from February 9th to March 12th. It'll be at 17 degrees Cancer right there, and it goes direct on February 23rd.
So that,
I mean,
that moment
go ahead.
that I'm looking at is January the 30th for those just listening, but that doesn't mean things will change on that day. It doesn't mean, yeah,
the thing that jumps out to me with this chart, besides these conjunctions here in late Leo, is Saturn at 1 Aquarius. So when Pluto hits that, you would think that there's a lot of things happening. I mean, that's in Ukraine's first house, in the way in which they present themselves and the way in which they identify themselves. Their whole self-image could change. And I think that Pluto's transit here, that has to be pretty gigantic, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
And I would look at that as a really positive thing.
Of course, Pluto's going to go retrograde. So Pluto will conjunct the Saturn first on January the 15th, exactly, but then is going to go back and conjunct again September 17th, 2025, when it's retrograde, and then again on November the 8th, 2025. So really it's hovering right over that Saturn all of 2025, transforming the structures.
And you would think that when the second pass direct, that whatever is initiated in January comes to some sort of fruition then in November and has a little bit of a crisis point when it goes back over retrograde. But I think that this is a year in which Ukraine redefines herself. And I think that that's a positive for Ukraine. If nothing else, we have to give them credit for being resilient as can be and for not backing down. And I think that I just think good things happen for Ukraine and NATO, and bad things happen for Russia. Simplistic, but I think it's true.
I want to add one other little wriggle, and I cannot remember the dates because I listened to a podcast by somebody that's been working with with Pluto's cycle, and on the middle path when Pluto is retrograde conjunct the Ukraine of Saturn on September the 17th. I believe Pluto will either be out of bounds or about to go out of bounds or have gone back in, which is quite rare and is going to change a lot of things because it's the last time Pluto goes out of bounds for thousands of years, and it's going out of bounds south, which is usually a time of peaceful revolution more than wars. Okay, so I think it's all boding well for Ukraine and their desire to be part of NATO and the alliances of the West, really, and democracy, whatever you want to call it. So,
Yeah, that's really fascinating, Louise. I love that.
yeah.
Could you put the final pass back up again, the one that's in November? Because there was one other thing that I think is important to pay attention to.
For the listeners, this is November the 8th, 2025.
Right. So notice in this, okay, first off, the sun is going to be on Ukraine's Pluto and heading for its midheaven. So that's like an amplifying of its power. But what jumped at me is in the transits, Jupiter at 25 degrees Cancer in its house of allies, trining Saturn at 25 degrees Pisces in its house of resources. Something's going to be shored up for it by then.
And that opposes their natal Mars too. I mean, that opposes their natal Mars. So you would think that gets some action. You would think.
You would think, yeah. So just showing everybody, Jupiter by transit is trine Saturn by transit then, and sextile to Mars in Virgo in the Ukraine chart on November the 8th. Wow.
Resources. That's an investment of something that's powerful. It enhances its power with the sun on its Pluto. So, yay.
Yeah, I feel excited.
And forgive me for jumping in just real quick. It would not surprise me that Ukraine becomes kind of a player in terms of military, and whether that be creating armaments, what they're doing with drones, or any number of things. I just think that Ukraine's power is on the ascension, and I think that if Russia is expelled, and I think at some point they will be, then, and that might take a year, right? I mean, that might put us to next November. Then that could be a really powerful thing for Ukraine as they collectively redefine what they want to do and how they want to be seen moving forward. So 12 months from now, Ukraine could be in a much stronger position, and that could, in fact, change the way they present themselves to the world, the way in which they're perceived, and the way in which people respond to them and how they make alliances. I just think a lot of people, who's with who, is going to be shaken and baken over the next 6 to 12 months. And I think that also puts the United States in a little bit of a tentative position. I don't think the United States can get too wild about we're the biggest thing there is, because there could be other people creating alliances that could offset some of that. But yeah, I think that Ukraine, I think that transit of their natal Saturn is likely to be gigantic in the way in which, because it's in their first house, right? In the way in which they present themselves on the world stage.
And before we go away from this, if you're sitting there going, well, what does this have to do with the U.S.? What does this have to do with the U.S. election? May I remind people that the current president has been hounded by all kinds of accusations that have been proven false about that Trump was trying to get dirt about the Bidens from Ukraine, and Biden was active in fighting corruption in Ukraine before any of these current things started going. But remember, the first impeachment of Trump involved his trying to extort Ukraine and Zelensky. What they're saying that he would not give the aid, but first you have to do this for me, which is not the way. But at any rate, so there's something tying back. All right, this is not just, oh, there's this war going on out there. There's a connection. We don't see it completely yet, but this is going to blow back on things that are happening right now.
And we can also reverse engineer this. if Russia's power diminishes and Russia is trying to create an alliance with Trump, and we would expect that they've been doing that for a long, long time, that would suggest several things. Either Trump's not there, Trump's hands are tied relative to Russia, the United States decides that Russia is no longer worth supporting. So what happens with Ukraine and Russia circles the earth and comes back to the United States. And again, it goes back to something we were very adamant about at the very beginning, right after the election, that what happens with Russia, Ukraine, NATO, and the Middle East would have gigantic implications on whether Trump even became president or whether that how we would perceive events moving forward. So just to real quickly reiterate, events between Russia and Ukraine and how the United States either supports or does not support Russia have huge implications. Well, no, how they support Russia, because Trump is a supporter of Russia. Trump's hands-off kind of approach is designed to support Russia. We are now supporting Ukraine because President Biden sees his alliances with NATO and he takes those things seriously. Trump doesn't, and that's why NATO is taking all these actions, because they don't trust Trump, right? So if Russia does not maintain its power position, how does that impact what happens within the United States? I just think that it's, from my opinion, somewhat short-sighted to just think everything is U.S.-centric. I mean, again, it goes back to the ideology that things happening in a bigger world circle back to the United States. And I do think that that circles back to the way in which the United States politics and positions of power and influence are shared throughout the world. And that will also impact Trump or whoever happens to be president at the time. So that's that speech. I guess I'm in a feisty Leo moon kind of mood today, I guess. Sorry.
Andy has a Leo moon, and the moon is in Leo, so it's fired up. But, I think we said last week, was it maybe? I think I said that, I felt that the US as the world power, the leader, is going to be a little bit humbled through all of this because of all the things that have happened. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's going to be a team player rather than think they have total power and control. So it does all matter, all of this, definitely. So anyway, shall we move on to Liz?
Yeah, so the other piece of news, interesting Mars retrograde drama. Liz Cheney, who was the co-chair of the House committee that set up Trump's second impeachment, looking into January 6th, his involvement with January 6th. A House committee has now issued a criminal referral of her for what she did on in the committee. Right. So, and you'll notice that she is Mercury and the Sun at 4 and 5 Leo, and the Mars retrograde started at 6 Leo. So it's heading for that. It's redoing what she did, fourth house, homeland, dealing with things with the homeland, dealing with things for her country. That's getting looked at again, and it squares her ascendant, which is at 6 Taurus. And this process is going to go on for a while, because as Mars continues its retrograde, it's going to get to 17 degrees Cancer early in February 9. Her Jupiter is at 18 Cancer, and it's going to sit at 17 Cancer until it's going to go direct on February 23rd, and then on March 12th, it moves away. So she's in the hot seat for a while, and it has to do with her communications. I don't know. I think, and it could be family stuff. We think family is going to get involved. And do note, she has Mars at 12 degrees Cancer. The US has a 13-degree Cancer sun. Whether your politics align with her policies or not, she honestly is a defender of this country, a defender of what we are about.
Yeah, and she's part of that Pluto-Uranus generation hers is very tight, closely together, that was born to kind of create change and revolution, with Pluto and Uranus heading towards their opening trine aspect next year, and or the year after. But that generation is really hot. But I also noticed that Neptune stationed direct just recently at the midpoint of her Chiron, and Saturn in her 11th house of politics, groups, organizations, and things. And Neptune, I think is going to bring probably a bit of a drain on her resources and finances and her energy and things, because these witch hunts, I'm going to call it that, are draining. People kind of end up bankrupt because of these investigations. Sometimes they really drag people down, and so it's also square to her moon. So the people, but also her emotional truth, but Saturn is daddy too in some ways,
which
so
we'll look at that in a second.
daddy too. Daddy Cheney.
But before you come in, I want to point out that Louise has highlighted the change agent signature, her tight conjunction with Pluto at 16 Virgo and Uranus at 17 Virgo. As Mars goes retrograde, as it sits for that 5-week period at 17 degrees of Cancer, as it's pumping up her Jupiter, it's also going to be in a sextile or an opportunity aspect to those two change agents. And this could be there's been some, and it's also trining her Neptune. So she could become a major, like almost like a Gandhi-like character out of all of this. This might be the seeds of her revitalizing the Republican Party or reshaping it. There's been a lot of talk about whether she's going to start a new party or whether she's going to remake the current party. And this process, this time period is going to position her in some way for that.
It is, definitely is.
Andy, what you got?
No, I agree with what Louise is saying. Absolutely. And the thing that, I mean, other than the obvious that retrograde Mars is hitting her Sun and Mercury, the thing that jumps out to me is Saturn retrograde at 29 Pisces here in the 12th, square her moon in the 9th, and her moon's in Sag at 29. So her sense of justice and kind of the skeletons in the closet and all the things going on with her, I think this is going to be complicated for Liz Cheney. I mean, I think that this is going to cause her a lot of anxiety, a lot of grief. I do think there will be a very concerted effort against her. But one thing that I think is quite possible is, and we'll get to Dick here in a second, if she fights this, does that go into the court system? And does that then push back what happens with the inauguration? Again, it would go back to something the three of us talked about early on, that there could be legal things that come up, which everybody goes, oh, no, that's not going to happen. Well, it very well could happen. And I think Liz Cheney is going to be a big deal, but it may not be so much fun for Liz Cheney. That would be the way I see it. But I agree with what Louise was saying. Absolutely. I think that is dead on.
Tying it to the legal ramifications, because she does have the sun, the moon in the house of legalities. She has recently revoiced her assertion that Trump should not take office, citing the 14th Amendment as barring him from it. Maybe she initiates a lawsuit to get that going. I mean, if they threw they didn't just throw a brick in a hornet's nest, they threw a hand grenade in a hornet's nest. And this would be her fighting, and there's an ideological streak to that Moon Saturn square with the moon in Sagittarius and Saturn in Pisces. This isn't I mean, she has a theory, but this is a belief system that is at its most extreme. Both of those placements are at the final degree of their signs. Um,
And I think
they,
we've heard that in her words,
oh yeah,
she
yeah.
wants to uphold the Constitution. I mean, we might not agree with her everything of her version of it, because I think a lot of it's open to interpretation, but she strongly believes in it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and she has three strong conjunctions in her chart. To me, she's a powerful force. And the thing that jumps out to me is Jupiter down here at the bottom of the chart. I always look at planets down by the IC. Anything close to the IC, especially on the fourth house side, is sort of complicated. And I think that her Saturn squaring the moon from the 12th and Jupiter down here at the bottom of the chart, in some sense, I think that she is, I don't want to say a sacrificial lamb, but she's being thrown into the fire here. I think that whatever happens with Liz Cheney is going to have a huge impact. I do believe that, whether it's fun for Liz Cheney or not. And I'm going to be fascinated what you two say about Daddy Dick, because I think those charts are crazy together. But
I would like to
I
point
don't
out
think this
that
helps Trump.
the moon and her Jupiter are in mutual reception too. They're
Yes.
each other's
Yeah, which
signs.
is pretty fascinating, I think.
So
Especially
her
being so close to the
emotions
IC.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Her whole sense of emotional safety and security really is in a way to fight for this justice. So she just feels driven to do it, in many ways.
And her Uranus is square Trump's Uranus. Her Uranus Pluto are square Trump's Uranus. Remember that we said that, because it's going to come up again in a second when we look at her father's chart. Trump has Uranus, the chaos agent, at the top of his chart in the 10th house, in the most public place, in his career house. And her, I'm going to make this better. I know how to fix it. I'm coming after you. Change, change, change. This is the Borg coming. Resistance is futile. Well, that's her. And
Mm-hmm.
she's going after him for being an insurrectionist. She's going after him for it, and you will not stop her. And like I said, they didn't just throw a brick in a hornet's nest, they threw a hand grenade. And she's not the only inhabitant of that nest. And I think they're going to rue the day that they reawakened the man who has been quiet
Dick
for
Cheney.
decades.
Dick Cheney's not the dude I would want to annoy. I'm just going to say that right off.
No, me neither. Me neither.
No, I'm not the biggest fan, but you got to admire him. He's kind of a toughie, and like you said, I would not want to mess with him. So I'm going
For
to
those
put
who don't know, her father was
Mm,
the vice president under George W. Bush, and many say he was running basically the government,
mm-hmm.
lovingly
And
known as
Secretary of
Mark
Defense under
Cheney.
his father.
Yeah, a good point.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I've put his chart up on its own right now. So he's having a Neptune opposition. So Neptune stationed opposing his Neptune, which is also tied into the US having recently had a Neptune opposition. And that's also kind of mission driven to do the right thing. It feels like being drawn to do that, to kind of, just anyway, there's a lot we could say about all these things, but of course that's also in aspect to his Chiron, which um, the wound of the homeland in a way in Cancer. It's like,
Hmm.
there's many things you could say about these things, but go on, you guys. Yeah.
He just had his Uranus return.
Mm-hmm.
Has Uranus at 22 degrees uh, uh,
Taurus. Mm-hmm.
Taurus. Thank you. Words, please. And so there's he's come full cycle in some way. And do note, we mentioned 17, we mentioned his daughters, Pluto and Uranus squaring Trump's 17-degree Uranus. Well, looky there, his Mars is at 17 Sagittarius. His Mars also squares, and in fact, his Mars and his Mars
This is
opposes Trump's
opposition.
Uranus, and they form a T-square to his daughters, Pluto and Uranus. So he is going to he must detest Trump with that opposition. He naturally wants to just take him out, take him down. And I know who I would bet on in this fight, but they're both going to energize Liz to be the one that takes things forward.
He's also right now having or just had a reverse nodal return, which is also a turning point from something that began 9.5 years ago. But not only is it a reverse nodal return, we're at lunar maximum, so it's kind of extra. It feels like he's kind of at this point where he's going a bit like Biden, but in a different way. It's kind of like, I was born for this moment, and I'm going to say, not on my watch, kind of thing.
Well, his North Node is on top of the U.S.
It is.
midheaven.
Yeah, it's on.
So he's a player in this. I don't know what it is he'll do.
It
Transiting
might be
Pluto
in the background, we might, yeah.
Transiting Pluto is opposing his Pluto. Transiting Pluto currently in his house of children, moving into his house of health. Who knows? Who knows what he dispatches or if this kills him? I don't know. I mean, I can't believe I just said those words, but he's not going to have a good reaction to what they're doing to his daughter for many reasons, not just because it's his child.
And the synastry between these two charts is crazy. Crazy. Yeah, put them next to each other and look how many conjunctions there are.
Who do you want in the middle?
I can't see it, so whatever you two do is good.
I think I'm going to put Liz in the middle because she's the one that they're going to go over, right? So, or go after, I mean.
It's got Jupiter, Saturn right on her ascendant.
And that, yeah.
Jupiter, Saturn on her ascendant, and his Uranus is on her North Node, and he's just had his Uranus return.
And his Pluto conjuncts her Sun, Mercury, and it just goes from there. And I mean, yeah. So this is a dude, simplistically, who is not going to back down. He's not going to be real keen about seeing his child messed with. And he's likely still has connections to people in high places. That speech, I think that, popcorn on the stove, baby. It gets dramatic. And who would have ever thought that liberals would be rooting for Dick Cheney? But that's probably the next episode of As the World Turns.
Well, that Mars retrograde is going to go over his Pluto very soon. So he's gonna stir from the depths. It'll be like, uh-oh, Cthulhu's coming out of the ocean. Oh, geez.
Yeah.
Wow.
Not the dude I want to wake up, but that's just, I guess that's me.
We do have to remember that, Biden is still our president, and we've looked at his chart with it, and he and Biden have both been in office for a long time. And we all know that these people, sorry, I'll clear off that. We all know that these people, do kind of get to know each other, and even if they're in complete disagreement, they often kind of talk to each other and so on. So shall I put Biden's chart with his?
Oh, yeah, that's a good
idea. I think that would be really cool, actually.
So here is Biden over here. So Cheney, Cheney's Uranus, which he's just had the Uranus return again, and Uranus is coming back to station at 23 degrees. So he's getting a close last pass of his Uranus return, is opposing Biden's Mercury in the
wow. Oh, excuse me.
So there's that. His moon, and Cheney's time is AA rated, by the way. So, that's a strong time. So his moon is right on the bottom of Joe Biden's chart on the IC by
Wow.
3 degrees. Yeah. So, that's I think they're going to talk.
His North Node is on Biden's Neptune.
Oh, so it is.
Yeah, Biden's Neptune in the 10th house at 1 degree Libra, to me, is his really being a spiritual leader. That's him embodying values, characteristics that are higher than a lot of what we see. And Cheney's aligned with this somehow. Cheney's going to be, who knows? I mean, Cheney was connected with a lot of activities that some of us took a lot of issue with, and maybe his conversations, or maybe there's some way in which he plays a role in assisting Biden to step into actions and approaches he would not ordinarily have considered. But like, under the circumstances, this is what you do. Because I think
It's
that
making those hard choices, isn't it, as a leader? Yeah.
well, I think Cheney is much more Machiavellian in the way he's gone about things.
Absolutely to that.
But look at when we looked at his chart alone, Dick Cheney, Kathy mentioned that retrograde Mars is transiting his Pluto right now. Well, look at this. His Pluto is in an almost exact trine to Biden's Sagittarius ascendant. Justice, truth, freedom, all those kind of things. So,
And the thing that jumps out to me is Joe Biden's Mercury is on Liz Cheney's South Node.
yep.
Oh, interesting.
So I'm going to talk because I'm used to talking for you. So I think that whenever I see a planet that's pretty much parked in somebody's South Node, I always think that there's a reciprocity between them energetically, and that there's sort of, I don't want to get too woo-woo-y, but this is my job, right? There's sort of that, pre-birth kind of contract deal between the two of them. So I would say that Biden is really going to try to support Liz Cheney, for sure.
Oh,
that's my theory.
And that, just to go to this as well.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah.
Biden's Uranus is at 2 degrees Gemini, right on his descendant. So that's alliances. This is making radical shifts to protect kind of what we have. This is this is changing perspectives, like Kathy said about Cheney might help Biden be able to do things he would not normally have done, just to get us out of this mess that we're in, kind of thing. Yeah. Wow.
And they have Mars trine. Again, back to Liz. Their Mars is an exact trine.
Liz and
Liz and Joe Biden.
Oh,
because they're both, well, oh, yeah.
12 Cancer, 12 Scorpio.
yeah.
That's an exact trine. Mars, we're in trine. We're going to help each other. Simplistic astrology, but often works out that way.
Oh, no, I agree. It's not simplistic. It's the chart's telling us that. And I think, I would invite people to get out of this past history of these people. They are going to work together, and they are all going to kind of do things they might not have done before, to protect what they feel they want to protect, or what they are meant to protect, whatever you want to call it.
And since we have the president's chart up, I'll just point out to people that as Mars continues its retrograde through his 8th house of things he's invested in, there are all kinds of ways you can look at it, but as it retrogrades, when it moves into it's going to square, it will hit 0 Leo and square Pluto at 0 Aquarius on January 3rd. And when it does that, it's going to make a T-square to his moon in the 5th. Something really dramatic occurring around then.
And I would agree with that, Kathy, for sure. I would say the same thing.
And I'll point out that as Mars continues its retrograde through Cancer, which will re-enter after it makes that square to Pluto, it's going to start flowing into Biden's Venus, unbroken, unimpeded, his Sun, and then his Mercury, and then it'll go back over. This is not someone who is going to go to Rehoboth Beach on January 21st, and we do not see him. Nope, 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 nope.
And if anybody's missed it, and I haven't had a chance to listen yet, he did an interview with Midas Touch, which was released, I think, this morning. And I just saw one quote of him saying, "I'm not going anywhere. I'm still going to be involved in foreign affairs." And he said, other things. So,
read what you want into that. Why would a Democratic ex-president be involved in foreign affairs if there were a Republican holding the office of the presidency?
Yeah.
So,
anything anybody else wants to say before we go? Because we're all busy coming up to the holidays, so I think we're going to keep these tight for now. But
I'd like to remind people where they can find us. Louise's channel is Cosmic Owl Astrology, and your website is louiseedington.com, correct?
Yes.
Right.
Yes, and I write on Substack too.
Substack. My website is empowermentunlimited.net. My Patreon is patreon.com/Kathy Biehl. And my YouTube channel is Professional Aquarian. And if you go to the About page there, it's got links to everything. I have a group on Facebook called the Astro Insight Lounge, where we talk about how astrology is playing out in the news and also share lots of really stupid sun sign memes. And Andy, you are on Facebook.
Well, I mean, my website is andrew-brewer.com. I mean, I'm sort of an eccentric old man who doesn't do much anymore, but that's where you can find me. And I'm on Medium too, which is Medium at Andrew Bassano Brewer. So I do go do that as well. And of course, Facebook is where I say everything I'm going to say, I guess.
I have a Facebook page.
And I don't do YouTube because I'm just like technically illiterate. So.
So yeah, so really Google Professional Aquarian for Kathy or Kathy Biehl and Louise Edington or Cosmic Owl Astrology for me. You'll find all the places, and just go to Facebook for Andrew Bassano Brewer or his website, as he said. So, and you can find the link to his website on Facebook too. So yeah, but
I
as
have it in
usual,
the show notes. Our videos are cross-posted. They're on Louise's YouTube channel and also on mine.
So we'd appreciate it if you subscribe to both and, do all the things just to encourage these things to get out there more, because people seem to be getting a lot out of them, thankfully. And I think I'd like to give our usual message, especially because we're heading into the holidays, of, find joy, self-care. Kathy's message of live in the world or what do you say?
Live in the energy of the world you want to be in. Mine has really tasteless Christmas shirts. Lots of glitter and sparkly lights year round. I lived on the Gulf Coast forever. Sparkly lights are just they're a decorating fixture there. So
yeah, and find some joy in your life, and to anybody that goes, "Oh, you laugh too much." I'm like, I take the situation very seriously, but I'm a great believer in finding the fun in what bedevils us and kind of poking fun at it as a way of joy is an act of revolution. All right. So.
And as someone whose first name is Rudolph, I have mixed feelings about the holidays, of course. But Santa's coming. He has a list, but you still get presents. It's all good. Everybody have a happy Santa Day. Have a happy week, a happy New Year. I still think 2025 is going to be a good year. I'm still optimistic, but yeah, it's Christmas, baby. It's time to celebrate, have a good time, be with the people you love, and
I
a
don't know.
special shout out to Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, my
We haven't
namesake.
even talked together and seen if we're doing anything next week, so we'll discuss that. But I don't stop for holidays.
Well, and if you miss us, we have a big library of videos that are static. Okay, it's not like yeah, there's some time sensitive stuff in it, but we look at the charts of pretty much everyone you could be curious about. So if you want to say, well, what haven't you looked at? We probably already have. And
Yeah.
Louise and I each have a playlist on our channels where you can just go through them all.
Yep. Mine's called World Events. Yours is called
Election 2024 and Aftermath.
There you go. So
Or
you
and
can find them
beyond or
all
something.
there as well. So until next time, peace out and find the joy. Bye.